Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored with Steve Taplin. Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored, where tech leaders drop the filters and just tell it like it is. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, serial tech entrepreneur. I have 30 companies under my belt. I've failed at 20 of those and scaled 10 of those to success. And I turned that roller coaster of a ride into my book, Fail Hard, Win Big, where I talk about how you need to use failure to make you better and analyze what went wrong and what you could have done different. And to me, turning failure into a superpower is the greatest thing as leaders we can do. Also, my successful companies have always had custom software in common for operations, for unique client experience, and for enterprise value. And it's been the key difference maker in the wins that I've had. Now I'm the CEO of Sonatify Technology. We're a nearshore software development company working with existing engineering teams without the corporate BS. Today, we have a fun guest, Z Yang, who runs a really cool gaming company, who has a heck of a story. Z is a tech leader, a founder, and he has a tagline that he likes to focus on building tech that actually supports the world rather than chasing investment money. I love it. Z, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Steve.
Z, if you would, take our listeners through the journey of your career.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's kind of starting off here. I'm Z. I founded and started a game company called Serenity Forge. Really, the career started at a young age, right? Like, I was a gamer. I played a lot of video games when I was a kid. I was a first generation immigrant from China. I moved here when I was 10 years old. And basically, while I was a kid, I played so many games that unfortunately, at one point in my life, when I was 18 years old, I ended up being diagnosed with a near fatal illness that caused me to be hospitalized for 2 years. Those were some of the most difficult years of my life. I mean, I was basically going through chemo. All my friends forgot about me. My family was very stressed out about the whole situation. And during this time, I didn't really have a lot going on for my life. So at this time, I realized, I can turn back into video games again. So I started playing all sorts of video games that are like single player games, made me feel like a hero. I'm going out there saving the world, saving people. Or multiplayer games where I was introduced to people online, people who barely even spoke English, but they were checking in with me every day, making sure that I'm taking my medicine, I'm getting the proper amount of rest. And I even met certain medical researchers by playing games like World of Warcraft online, who gave me critical advice that ended up keeping me alive. So coming out of that experience, by the time it was 2011, I was able to kind of slowly recover. I started taking classes, I started going back to school, but I was thinking to myself, like, these games like League of Legends, they're not really made to help me, but they ended up saving me. What if I start making games with intention to help other people? What kind of power can that unlock? So that's when I started realizing maybe I should start making games. As I mentioned, I came from a low-income family, first-generation immigrant. I wasn't able to afford all the college classes or anything like that to learn how to program a game. I was going to school for finance. So I just started looking up the class portals, like, where are these programming classes? And then I would find them, I would sneak in. I would basically start learning C++. At one point, I took a midterm and confused the professor because I wasn't in his class, just to kind of see how far I got. So I learned C++ by sitting in classes without paying for them. I borrowed the textbooks from the school libraries to learn OpenGL and different types of coding, graphics libraries and stuff. And by the time it was I was done with my freshman year, I made my first video game, C++, and that was overall a really great experience. And this game was made basically as a non-fictional story about my near fatal illness. About a month after I released this game, it was a free game online. You can just play it. You kind of learn about my backstory. About a month after I released the game, I got this email from this kid from Spain. And he was telling me that apparently, as it turns out, that he's been struggling a lot with his mental health. He actually has been planning to take his own life. But while he was going through online research, he came across the game, he played it, and it inspired him so much that he decided to put a stop to his plans, enroll into a local game design school, and start making games as well, inspired by his own experiences to kind of tell his stories.
Amazing.
Email me and thank me for it. Again, I'm a freshman in college at this time, and I look at this email and I think to myself, well, I'm not Mark Zuckerberg. I didn't make $1 million overnight, but I may have saved someone's life by making a game. Maybe I should do this more. And that's kind of how the whole company got started. Throughout the next couple of years of my college, I started making more games, dragged more friends into it. And by the time I was a senior in college, we were already 6 full-time employees working out of a basement, making some educational games as contract works for some companies, as well as helping my friends release their games, including launching a game called Lifeless Planet, which was just a game that we really started putting the game onto PlayStation and Xbox and Wii U at the time. Ended up generating around $3 to $4 million in sales. And I thought, again, like I'm just a college kid and this does seem like it's going somewhere. So let's just keep on doing that. 10 years later, after I graduated college, here I am, basically doing the same things every day, just in a larger scale. We now have an office not only here in Boulder, Colorado, as well as Hungary, Budapest, that's kind of handling a lot more of the global publishing and operations. We're around 40, 50 people around the world, just making, publishing games, kind of, creating products for good. So yeah, that's kind of how everything got started.
What a cool origin story, Z. And it's the inspiration you got from unfortunately going through a horrible experience and how games saved you. And then to use that for others is just amazing. So I have to applaud. That is like such a cool origin story. And thank you for sharing that. So tell us more about Serenity Forge.
Yeah, absolutely. So Serenity Forge's mission statement is that we create meaningful and emotionally impactful experiences that challenge the way you think. So essentially, there's kind of two major categories here that we care about. We want to make games that are meaningful, that are kind of pushing the world forward, something that's actually making people's lives, making the world a better place. And, some of the things that we ask ourselves is when we create a game, what kind of an impact does this game have on society? Imagine if this game is now played overnight by 1 million people, everyone in the world is now playing this game. What is that world like? Did we make the world better? Are we proud of that world that we just made? So that's kind of like the number one question that we ask ourselves. The second question, emotional engagement, is very important for us. I mean, a dialysis machine is good for the world, right? Like you don't need to be making video games to save people's lives. The way that we do it is that we have to do it through a strong emotional impact. So did this game make you cry? Did this game make you think something that you didn't think before? Is this something that you're going to carry with you for the rest of your life? A story is only as meaningful as long as you remember it. So we want to make sure that this is a game that you can remember, you can share, a story that you could really use to become a better person with. So those are kind of the main elements there. From a business perspective, we work with all sorts of platforms. As we discussed already, PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo Switch, PC, mobile, we're basically on everything. And when we make games, we think about the platforms that we do to kind of cater towards those audiences. In addition to just the platforms themselves, I'm standing in front of a wall of all of the games that we have not only developed, published. I personally designed a lot of the boxes that you see behind me and all the goodies that kind of come in it. And then we sell these games and distribute them across all the retailers around the world: Walmart, Target, Best Buy, GameStop, all of them. And not only the games, but also the merchandise, a lot of things like vinyl records or, figures of characters or, even toys and gadgets. These are all things that we do because we want to be able to support our fans to kind of have them have that long lasting impact that's positive for them. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of really in a nutshell, a lot of our inspirations and a lot of what we do. The way I like to simply describe to people is, as Serenity Forge, we go from thinking of game ideas all the way to selling games on the shelves of Walmart and pretty much everything in between. And the only thing that really we're really laser focused on is that kind of meaningful emotional impact value that we look at when we make
Fantastic. So tell us, I know you have a current project you're working on. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so a couple months ago we launched, we announced our newest game, Fractured Blooms, at the Jeff Keighley Show Summer Game Fest, which ended up being actually the largest game showcase ever in human history. 50 million viewers during the showcase, and that's just during the showcase, not after hours broadcast, which amounts to hundreds of millions of views, which is phenomenal. We're very lucky to be able to have that opportunity to announce the game. So Fractured Blooms is a psychological horror life sim game where it's heavily inspired by true stories that took place in my family. So I'm personally directing this game, and in the game you play as someone who is basically kind of in this infinite loop of farming, cooking, taking care of your house, and doing a lot of things to kind of keep your kind of yourself and also the people around you alive. And as you keep on going with the game, you'll start to realize that the world might not be what you think it is, and that you might not be who you think you are, and the mystery starts unraveling itself. And that's basically Fractured Blooms.
So I have a dumb question. When you're building a game, so you mentioned you are the director. What does that mean in the gaming world? Is that just like a movie director or a TV show director? I don't know much about the process of making games. Educate me. I'm sure there's got to be some listeners who have no idea either.
Yeah, I think video games are confusing, and they are confusing because they are very nuanced to create. So one of the things about making games is that depending on how large of a team you're in, it also changes how specialized you would be. Our team is relatively small in the game space. I mean, we're decent. We're not like a dude in the basement, but we are a decent size. We are like a pretty small team overall to kind of push out product. For example, the Fractured Blooms team, we're about like 4 or 5 people. So it's actually a pretty small team to kind of make a game that otherwise look a lot more ambitious than what's being made, right? So in a small team like that, as a director, you're really touching everything. Like I'm literally drawing 2D art. I have my tablet pen right here. Like I would literally just start drawing, in front of my computer. There, I would do like 3D art, putting together models, characters, or props, or make a chair or something that kind of shows up in the game. I would be writing the stories of the game. I don't do a lot of the coding nowadays myself. Thankfully, we have way better programmers on our team who are doing that. So there's really kind of mostly a wide variety of things. You play the game a lot to kind of see how if it's good. I'm guessing directors or rather editors probably do that a lot in the film space. But yeah, I mean overall it can be pretty confusing. I mean, to answer your question though, in kind of a larger scale capacity, usually a video game director is kind of more the either like typically an operation or an idea person or some kind of mixture of the two.
Okay.
There are other ways to look at the role, like for example, a producer is usually more operations based. Meanwhile, a creative director is going to be a little bit more focused on the idea. And then ultimately, you kind of have to marry them together at some point in an organization to keep things afloat and keep things kind of running. And that's usually like either a game director or more of an executive director. So that's kind of the person that's at the top, kind of hearing all the voices and making your decisions. Ultimately, in a larger setting, you're kind of more of an executive in that capacity. These like tens of thousands of people sized games, that's usually what you do.
So tell me about your software engineering team and just how software engineering works in the video game space.
Yeah, I mean, software is pretty tools driven in the game space. I mean, you rarely, at least at our level, you rarely go into the engine and kind of write your own custom code. Typically, you work with a number of game engines that would support certain languages. Like for example, right now the game that we're working with is in Unreal 5. And Unreal typically uses a C++ kind of backend. Meanwhile, there's also kind of a blueprint system that's a little bit more user friendly, more beginner friendly, but typically a little bit more inefficient when it comes to processing. That's kind of more of a graphical node coding platform that's inside it. So that's kind of how Unreal works. There's another game engine that we use very often is Unity, and that works in C# typically, and that's a lot more easy to kind of get into. A lot of app developers, in addition to game developers, use Unity. It's a little bit more cross-platform, so that one's pretty big as well. And then there's kind of a number of different types of game engines, ranging from small game engines made by a single guy named Godot, which is actually now very widely used, to almost like not a game engine, almost like a toy, stuff like RPG Maker or Ren'Py that makes smaller games in a very specific style that you had to kind of use that tool for. And in those things, you basically there's no coding involved at all. Like I started making games when I was like 10 years old, basically in some of these smaller engines. So it could vary quite a bit. Ultimately, I think one of the most important kind of conceptual things to think about as an engineer in the game space is that an engineer in the game space is never really the point, right? Like what I mean by that is that you are typically a support role in the greater scheme of things because you have your artists, you have your storytellers, you have your creative vision holders that are trying to make this thing a meaningful, emotionally engaging experience. And the programmers are typically there to kind of carry that out to make that happen. You're the building blocks of that experience, but not necessarily the point of the experience itself.
So in the gaming space, is the coding side more like a low code type environment that you're doing within a platform, or is it more traditional custom software engineering? I'm trying to understand the difference.
Yeah, I mean, it really, really depends, to be honest. Like some people are going in there literally writing stuff from scratch. I mean, in my early days of writing C++ code, calling OpenGL to try to show an image on your screen. These are, I mean, it's not the lowest. I'm not writing binary at the very least, but it is like somewhat low. I'm essentially writing my own game engine at that point to try to, display audio or display video and, play audio of some kind through your computer. So that does happen a lot. Typically, though, in that very extreme setting, you're usually working with hobbyists or very advanced folks like systems engineers or deep kind of complex engineering to kind of modify the engine itself. Typically, what you're doing is that you're taking a game engine like Unreal 5, and then you realize the engine is either unable to support the game functions that you want to create, or it's too inefficient to support the systems that you want to create. So you have to go in there and rewrite the game engine to try to support the things that you want. Like, for example, Unreal 5 is very great at displaying beautiful lighting with 3D colors, and it's just amazing. There's ambient occlusion, there's all sorts of rendering methods, but maybe it's not very good at handling large amounts of data. So if you're making a strategy game that has a lot of data that's being calculated every frame, it's probably going to be inefficient because it's dedicating all its resources to graphical fidelity. So then you have to go into the back end, make the modifications that you need to still get good graphical fidelity, but maybe just kind of tweak some of those resources to make it work. So that's kind of on that side of the spectrum. Now, the truth is, I think most people do work on this side, which is the kind of the low code kind of environment where you're doing a lot more of the graphical node movements. You're more of a designer than you are a engineer. So we call them programmers, right? Like there's kind of a somewhere in between thing where you have to kind of touch both. Typically,
Gotcha.
as a game developer, you're one of the biggest skills that you have to pick up really is to make a decision on where does that need to go as a node thing, where does that need to go as a code thing. And between the two, it's like, yeah, you can write the code, but that becomes permanent. You can't like play around with that. That's real code, and now the game has to obey that code. But it's efficient and it runs real quick. Or you can do this thing that's like a lot more node based and it's like all sorts of like logic or whatever, hard to debug, hard to collaborate with, but it's fast. You did that in 5 minutes compared to writing a whole code thing that took you 5 days. So being able to judge between the two is a huge skill in itself.
Gotcha. So you announced Fractured Blooms at the Summer Game Fest, 50 million viewers. Did you guys commit to a rollout date?
Not yet. We have a lot of discussions since then. To be honest, we were expecting
I
this game to
prefer
be.
July.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to be honest, like this game was meant to be a very small game when we first started working on it. Once we announced the game, it popped off. Now everyone cares a lot about it. We're not really sure what to do with that information. We spent the past couple months just thinking to ourselves. I mean, having this kind of like rich person's problem essentially. It's like now there's a lot of stress, a lot of, just a lot of expectations that we have.
You had the oh shit moment. This is going to be really big where we thought it'd be small.
Yeah, exactly. I think so. I even remember I was chatting with Kevin, our business director, at the hotel after we announced the game because we had these metrics, right, where we measure stuff. And there's a thing called the Steam wish list that basically tells you how many people wanted this game. I think after the day of announcement, he looked at the numbers in the morning. He asked me, "Hey Z, take a guess how many wish lists we got on this first day." And I was like, oh, maybe like 2,000. That was like a pretty solid announcement. Like 2,000 is a pretty solid announcement typically. He's like, okay, well, we got 75,000. So,
Wow.
so yeah. So like in terms of like even after the fact, the expectations were just kind of continues to grow and kind of blows out of the water. So,
You can't. All right. Let me rephrase that differently. Let's just say your goal was to get it out by December 31st.
Yeah.
What would be the biggest challenges or obstacles in your world to get that work done by that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, at this point, the biggest challenge I'm facing, is trying to figure out what is this kind of ideal version of this game now that the resources really opened up themselves. Again, like previously, we were expecting a smaller title. Now everyone's knocking on our doors. Like people are coming to us saying, "Hey, like how do we invest in this project? How much money do you need?" Blah blah blah. We weren't planning to pitch this to anyone, and now like almost the nature of this the beast has changed. People are expecting a different game. We need extra resources. So yeah, might as well chat with some of these people. So we're kind of going through that process right now, but it also kind of will change a lot of the plans that we have down the road. So the biggest hurdles that I'm currently facing is, well, figuring out what is the proper size of this game, what is the proper design of this game, figuring out the team behind it. We're probably going to need a larger team and scale up and kind of hire more people, and then figuring out how to actually build out the production system, the production pipeline for us to carry out the game, and then double checking all of our work to make sure that this is actually going to work out. Check our cash flows, check everything. So really a combination of a lot of these things: planning, a lot of production. It's exciting, but also just a lot more extra work that we're gonna have to get through.
Well, there's good problems in business and there's bad problems, and I would definitely, count this in the good problem category. Now, where do you see, you've made your life out of gaming, your gaming company. Where do you see Serenity Forge in the next 10 to 20 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think 10, 20 years, hard to say. We've only been around for 10. So that's going to be, doubling, tripling our lifetime at this point as a company. I think I have some guesses as to where we are. I mean, I think we would be still releasing very meaningful games for society. I expect that we would have made major differences in people's lives with some of the games that we have launched, maybe pushed the envelope a little bit forward in our society in terms of conversations about certain topics. But also, I think there's a kind of this idea that I have that doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily tangible growth in the sense that we measure normally. Like, for example, our game was fairly small, but ended up being announced to tens of millions of people based on its merits. Our one of our previous titles, the Doki Doki Literature Club Plus, which we published previously at the end of last year, the game has reached 30 million downloads, and that's made by a pretty small team. So in terms of growth, I do expect to grow, but I don't necessarily think the growth has to come with number of people, number of offices, blah blah blah. I think we will grow naturally as we need it, but we would not grow erroneously in the sense of trying to pursue this thing that doesn't really work. So ultimately, I think that's just a long-winded way for me to say that we will continue to be creative. We will continue to really focus on what matters, and we'll continue to push the envelope forward through art.
How does AI play in the development of games and that world? And anything we talk about today, by the time someone listens, will probably be outdated. But how does AI changing the game development world?
I mean, honestly, the thing that AI changed the most.
Once again, I want you to lie to me. Don't be honest.
Yeah, the honest thing about the game industry right now with AI is that it's pissing people off everywhere. And honestly, I mean, I think that's probably in tech as well, to a lesser degree. But in games, absolutely. I think the reason is because games are a marriage of art and tech. And there's tech people who are very excited about AI and what it's able to bring. And there are art people who are very offended by the ethical and moral dilemmas that we're facing. And
I can see that.
AI does, right? So then ultimately, you're kind of like shoving two completely different groups of people, forcing them to kind of subscribe to the same worldview and tell them that this is going to be what it is. And truthfully, I think most companies in the game industry are already using AI one way or another. I believe I read some stat that like 95% of games at this point being made are have AI involved to some degree. Sometimes you can't even escape it. Like you can go to Google and try to Google something up, and then an AI text box pop up and tell you the answer. Did you just use AI to make your game? Like a lot of this stuff, you just can't really judge anymore. The way that Serenity Forge looks at things is that I'm a little bit more kind of old school in kind of how I think regarding, not necessarily regarding tech, but more regarding the role of tech that plays in human civilization. The way I see things is that tech is never really a goal. It's more of a tool for us to achieve certain goals that we have. Serenity Forge's goals are to create meaningful and emotionally impactful experiences. Will this particular tool help us? Throughout our time of working in the game space, stuff came and went. I mean, like there's free to play that came out and became like the biggest thing, and mobile is like huge, and then it kind of collapsed on itself, and then it kind of like came back up. There's stuff like VR, AR that I was just joking with our some folks in our company. It has been an adoption phase for about 20 years. So we're still there. Eventually maybe we'll finally get there. There's stuff like consoles, right? That kind of came, and they play different roles as time goes on. Subscription services, loot boxes, NFTs, Web3, blockchain, crypto. I mean, there's so many different things that came and went. And every time that we look at it, we think to ourselves, does this piece of technology actually help us achieve our goals? Does VR help us achieve our goals? Yes, to some degree. It makes it so that the games are more immersive, so that's a stronger emotional impact. But it's not really distributable. You can't really show that game to someone in Vietnam. So it also hurts us in certain ways. Does mobile help? Well, that's actually the opposite. Now the Vietnamese player can play it, but it's not nearly as immersive. It's more like a, Flappy Bird. Stuff like NFTs, we looked at it and said, this does nothing for what we do. I'm sure it's really great for getting investment money, but for video games as a whole, it does not support the players that we see. And for AI, I think we do the same thing. And AI is such a big bucket. It's like, does
Yes, it is.
ChatGPT, right? Like, is ChatGPT helping us? Is Midjourney helping us? Is Stable Diffusion helping us? I mean, like, different things are helping us in different ways. Some things are better than others. So ultimately, we look at it case by case and think about how it actually helps us achieve our goals.
Well, Z, thank you for getting uncensored with us today. Congratulations on overcoming a terminal illness and then creating a company with meaning of how games saved you and how you could do the same for others. I can't think of a better mission that you're doing. Congrats to you on your success that you keep having. Before we wrap, as you're now, successful gaming founder of a company, what advice do you have for others out there, whether it's in tech or gaming, who want to follow a similar path?
Yeah, I think really the biggest advice is to just go out there and try it and do the thing. I think most people don't really pursue their passions in life nearly as much anymore, because we grow up in this society where we're taught by people to obey and tell people in college or universities telling us that you just got to go find your entry level job or whatever. But the truth is, like, people who make a difference in the world are people who are out there doing something they're very passionate for. And when you're doing something you're very passionate for, you're putting in your 80, 100 hours a week just to do it. And you're naturally going to end up being better than the other people doing that same thing, whether it be tech or pursuing your music career or whatever it is, right? I think if you are going into the world to pursue your true passions, you are naturally stacked up to be the best in that particular thing. And even if you're not, at least you give it a try. So that's probably my advice for people to try it and, give it a shot.
Awesome advice. Thank you, Z. That's it for this episode of Software Leader Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin. If you liked the show, go ahead and hit subscribe. If you didn't like it, well, go ahead and tell your competitors about it. They could probably use the help. Remember to fail hard, win big, and always build what matters. See you next time. That's a wrap. Another great episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun doing this show. I love talking with great tech leaders. As a side note, if you're interested, check out my new book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This is the story of how I built 30 companies, failed on 20, and turned 10 into multi-million-dollar wins. The common thread with all of them was custom software. Also, if you need software development help out there, my company, Sonotify Technology, we deliver world-class software development engineers out of Latin America. We have a solid track record of helping companies launch better products and faster. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it and appreciate you.